Thanks. Well, hello, good evening, and thank you very much for coming here and sitting with us in this presentation. My name is Sherry Wellman. I'm the fire inspector, or a fire inspector, for Park City. And this is Jess Kirby. She is the public lands manager for Summit County, and she's the organizer of the Living with Wildfire series. And she's going to talk a little bit about that coming up here, and I'll leave that to her. This is the first meeting in the series, and we've got a lot more information coming all throughout the summer. And we're really excited to have everyone here physically and virtually as well to get together and talk about this really important topic of wildfire, because it touches all of us as locals living and working here in Park City and Summit County, as well as second homeowners and business owners. The implications of wildfire are so far reaching, and there's so much that we can do to protect ourselves and our neighbors. We really are in this together. And when you make your own home and your own property safer, you actually make your neighbors and your entire community safer. So it is an effort for all of us to join in together. And you know, this is a pretty big topic, the Park City Wildland Urban Interface Code and wildfire mitigation. We're not going to be able to get through every single detail and answer every question this evening, unfortunately. However, because of the Living with Wildfire series, we will have more meetings to come. So we're going to be talking about different topics all throughout the county, as well as the fact that we are here to be a resource and to help. So if you do have questions that are not answered at the end, or if things come up, please feel free to reach out to us. We do have some contact information and resource information in the back on the table, and we will also be posting that information at the end of the presentation for those of you who are attending virtually. And we do have some fantastic experts here to help us with this information. We have some people who have agreed to be here to answer any questions that might be best answered by their expertise. And so we have Bryce Boyer, the Summit County Fire Warden, and we also have Travis Wright, the Northeast Utah Wildland Urban Interface Coordinator. And our panelists tonight include Ryan LaFontaine. He is the Northeast Area Fire Management Officer with the Utah Department of Natural Resources. We also have Mr. Mike McComb. He is our Park City Emergency Manager. We have Brant Lucas with the Park City Fire District. He is the Wildfire Community Liaison. And we also have Heinrich Dieters, our Park City Trails and Open Space Program Manager. Dave Thacker, our Park City Chief Building Official and Fire Code Official. And of course, Jess Kirby. And I just want to say thank you again to everyone that's here, and a special thank you to our panelists and the people that have agreed to come and answer any questions. We really, really appreciate your time. And I also wanted to say thank you to our community engagement team, including Emma Prasunka and Linda Jager. They were very instrumental in helping us put all of this together. So without any further delay, here's Jess Kirby.
Pattern.
There we go. Okay.
Thanks for that intro, and glad to be here and just give you a little background. This series really fell in place on its own. Kept getting reached out by different partners around the community and different parts of Summit County of, you know, how can we reach out to this environment? How can we get folks to learn about wildfire? And we want to do this panel or that panel. And I thought, well, why don't we just put this all together into one place and give the public a common area to, you know, find resources and figure out what's going on in the community. And so this list up here is not comprehensive in any way. There's more being added all the time. But just to give you a rundown of what we've got going, today starts off the series, and May is Wildfire Awareness Month, so very appropriately so that we're all here talking about this subject. The next meeting is going to be a stakeholders group meeting in the Weber watershed, and in my presentation I'll jump into a little details on what that is encompassing, but looking for some stakeholder input on an open house there. Following that, we actually are doing actually three, one of them's not on this list, fire community meetings, all in Spanish for our community that is Spanish speaking. So those are going on, one in the eastern side and one in Park City area. Then we'll be doing landscape collaboration, and it's more of a practitioners workshop, and that's for the professionals in the field, and how can we collaborate and work on finance together. So this kind of is doing the whole gamut of community engagement, Spanish language and practitioner outreach. Then we're going to go into the CERT training, which is also it's another specialized training that happens in conjunction with the fair out at the Ledges Center at the County Fair in Colville, and that is for the community emergency response team. If you're interested in learning more about that, I would encourage you to reach out to Mike McComb here or Catherine McMullen, who is the county emergency manager. She's got details on that, and all this information will be online as well. Our last final two is we're going to do a wildfire and local landscapes, and that one was teed up by Swanner, a nature conservancy, or I'm sorry, Swanner Nature Preserve, and they're looking into how is this changing landscape happening with fire? How can we live with it? How can we help create those landscapes so that they're not so detrimental to the aftermath of fire? So there'll be some experts coming from USU to talk about that. And then our final one to kick off into our burning season, it's going to be hosted by Park City Fire District, and talking about prescribed fire and why how can we fight fire with fire. So this kind of is a broach of all topics of we're starting out with home hardening and WUI and how we deal with landscapes, how we deal with financing and getting mitigation done, how we do outreach, how we get to our community and our stakeholders. So there'll be more topics to come. So that QR code there's some handouts in the back that has that as well, but you can reach that off of the public lands site on the Summit County website. And then Park City will also be hosting that as well. And we'll just keep that up to date with all the information. Some of the events will be virtual and in person, but most of them will be in-person events. We're trying to come back from our hiding in our homes that we've been doing for 2 years. I know it's kind of hard for all of us. It's easy to sit online, and I appreciate everybody online who is on. And it actually is a good way to get more attendance too, but we're hoping for some good collaboration in person as well. As you can see, we've got a multitude of sponsors and partners in this, and it just shows the power of, the change in philosophy and how we're managing our lands and the interest in this topic. And specifically want to put a shout out to the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. They have given a grant to help sponsor some of these events. So more on them as well in my presentation. So that's it for now. Thanks for coming. Okay.
Pattern. The 8 to 14 day outlook, taking us from May 8th to the 14th, shows cooler conditions for the Great Basin.
Okay, so
and wetter
I'm Ryan
conditions
LaFontaine,
across
Northeast
Idaho,
Area Fire
Wyoming, dipping
Management
down
Officer
into
for the
Utah.
state.
Again, that storm track.
We're going to play a quick video.
Those
It's
areas, and then drier
not the
conditions
whole
further
video, but
south.
it's the predictive services outlook on
for
the
the
fire
next 4
danger
months
for
shows temperatures in the top
Region
row
4,
generally
but
showing
mostly for
warming
Utah.
across the southern half of the
It
Great
won't be
Basin
the
for
whole
the next
video,
couple
like I
of
said,
months,
but it'll be
and that
the
warming shifts
part
further
that,
north for July
you
and
guys will
August.
see.
As far as our
Hopefully it'll work.
precipitation, we'll see drying, especially later in May and especially towards June. Could see a very significant drying trend during the last half of May into June, which obviously could rapidly cure
So
our
I'll
fuels
talk while
and
it's playing.
see a big increase in the start
So
of fire season in those
for
areas.
what this
Then we'll
service
see those
is, it
drier
gives us
conditions
a 3 to
possibly
4 month
persist in the
outlook
north going
on
through July and August,
what our fuels
with
and
the
weather are
monsoon
going to do,
expected
and then
to
our
start
fire
near on
behavior that's going
time
to come from that.
and be fairly robust.
With the
so
data
we could
that
see
they're
that
getting,
moisture start late
we're
June,
seeing
early July,
is
and push up
the
into the
near
Great Basin,
future
diminishing our
time
fire
frame.
potential
So call out looking
concerns
into
and pushing
June
many of those
and
concerns further north.
July is a
So putting everything together, we are expecting
above
some above
normal,
normal fire potential with the drought and how
above
warm and
normal
dry things have been
chance
recently in
for
the
extreme
south.
fire behavior.
If you
So this
remember,
is
we did
May,
have
as you
that
can see,
above normal
because of the
herbaceous fuel
fuels and
load in
all the
parts
snow
of these
melting in
areas of
southern
southern
Utah,
Nevada
there's an
into
above
Utah,
normal chance
but also our
for
mid and higher
extreme fire
elevations
behavior,
where we're
extreme
seeing
growth
well
in
below normal snowpack,
southern part of
and
the
the drought
state and in southern
concerns is what
Nevada.
really targets that area for May. And
As
it's
we
mainly
start
really
getting
the
into
latter half
the
of
spring
May.
and summer months and into
In
June, you
June, that
can
area
see
expands,
the
especially further
higher
north into
elevations
parts of
of the
central
Wasatch
Utah and the higher
will
terrain
start
where
curing
the
out
snowpack
and
will likely
accepting
diminish
fire
fairly
a lot
quickly.
more. So we have
Areas further north,
normal
likely
danger,
the snowpack's still a little bit too
to
much,
the
so
higher
we'll still be
elevations
in
of the
the
Wasatch
drying
range. So
trend through much of June.
that's where we
However,
live,
by
right?
July, we do expect the monsoon to
And then
push into
moving
southern
into
areas
July,
of the
you're
Great
seeing
Basin,
that
so that
spread
will
more out
expand
into the
our
deserts.
above normal fire potential into the higher terrain of Idaho,
where it
especially
says
central and
GB
eastern Idaho,
26,
and also
right in
northern
the middle
Utah.
of the red area there.
Parts of northwest Utah, where we did have that higher herbaceous fuel load,
So
could
looking at
see
this
some
fire
concerns
season
in
with
the lower
the snow
elevations in
coming
some
off
of those local
rapidly,
areas.
we're in
And also
2-3
in the
years
Sierra,
of
similar
really
to last
bad
year with the
drought.
drought
So
and the drier and
what we're
warmer
looking at is
conditions,
a
we are
pretty
expecting
bad
that
fire
area
season.
to
Our
increase in
saving
fire
grace
potential yet
last
again
season
this
was
July
the
and
monsoons
also
that
into
came
August.
in late
And
July
by
into
August, our main
August.
threat will be in the north and in the
See
west,
how
but
into
also pushing into
August
Wyoming as
the
well
red
later
moves
in
farther
July and
north and
into
we go back
August.
into a normal fire season.
That concludes our
Not saying we
webcast for
won't
this
have
month.
fires,
Check
that's just
back
saying
for
we're
our
gonna
next
have
seasonal
normal
outlook
fire
on
season.
June 1st.
We still have fires, but the chance of them becoming very large and extreme is minimal. So like I said, what the saving grace was last year was the monsoons coming in. Right now, the preliminary reports are that the monsoons will come in as strong or stronger than last year, which could help us out during those July into August months. For most of you that live up here, you know that a lot of our fire season comes in the fall when we start losing the leaves, all the fuels start to cure out. So we'll look at seeing later on, these come out every month. So we'll be watching them every month and we send them to all the fire departments, emergency managers. So we'll see what it looks like later in the season. If we get those early snowstorms, that could slow our fire season down or put it out. But we'll have to wait and see. Right now, we're looking to be about normal to above normal for the first couple months here. And then hopefully we'll get a respite for a little while. So that's the weather and the fuels side of things. As far as resources that we have in our interagency community, up here in northern Utah, we have a multitude of resources within our Forest Service, BLM, and BIA partners. That includes engines, hand crews, and helicopters. A lot of those are here for the national, to help out the national fire good. But when we do have a large fire in the area, we lean on all of our partners to come help out, including our local partners from around us. That's all I have, and I'll be able to answer any questions afterwards. Thank you.
I'm advancing these, I presume. Cool. All right. So good evening to everyone in the audience and online. I am Mike McComb, the emergency manager for Park City. And thanks to Sherry for putting this on, and thanks to Jess for putting on this whole series, because I think one of the keys to tackling this huge problem is community engagement. How do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. And there's a big elephant waiting to be ate. So having the whole community together working on this problem from their various aspects and angles is going to be key to protecting the community. So just a very brief overview of the Parley's Canyon fire. Everyone remembers that last August, right? When it kicked off. You don't remember that, Bryce? Oh yeah, sorry, I tend to wander. So, so let's see. So last August, mid-August, almost 1 year to the day, to the 2020 Parley's Canyon fire, which also kicked off from sparks on I-80, very similar location and a little bit further down the valley. But Park City Fire, first on scene, made a very good call they sized it up and they said, no, we need more resources. They made early calls to Bryce and others, and we got after it. So we got those resources ordered early in the fire before it became a big issue. It became pretty clear that due to the winds and the rate of spread, that Summit Park was going to be threatened. And so Summit County Sheriff made the call very early to evacuate. And working with Bryce and our partners, and we got people's out of harm's way. Park City Fire sat on the buildings there to do structure protection within Summit Park, so protecting those homes and residences. And we were ready. It was good. Summit County Sheriff conducted evacuations using search and rescue. They literally going door to door and marking and all the rest. We used our emergency mass notification system to alert people who were in the area who maybe weren't at home at the time. Working with Park City School District, we quickly established shelters for anyone who had to be evacuated, who didn't have some place to go. All in all, it was a phenomenal response from my perspective. It was a great example of the teamwork and the relationships that exists up here between agencies and various departments. And it was great. That is one key takeaway. And I should really say key takeaways, plural. The other key takeaway is we were extremely lucky. And how were we lucky? Let me count the ways. First off, it happened during a time when there were no large fires ongoing in the state. That meant that our statewide Type 3 team, incident management team, was ready to respond that afternoon. They were not deployed elsewhere. Aircraft that would normally have been up in Oregon and Idaho fighting those fires couldn't fly because the air was too smoky, so they were on the ground locally, which meant that they were overhead literally within minutes. The Type 4 management team based out of, Type 2 management team based out of Boise was between large scale incidents. And when they got the call, said that it was going to be a significant response required, they were available. So we had a Type 2 incident management team on the ground taking over within 36 hours, right? It's almost unheard of. How else were we lucky? Well, if you remember, the middle of the week, that monsoon moved in and it doused the fires. I mean, put them out. So by Friday morning, there was a local Type 4 incident management team that took responsibility of the fire. So we went inside of a week, for a Type 3, Type 2, all the way down to a Type 4. We were exceptionally lucky. And I highlight that because there's a tendency when things go as well as they did during this particular incident, there's a tendency to become complacent, be like, we got this, we got it nailed. And while I have full faith in our relationships and our partner agencies, we got lucky. Okay, enough said on that. Let's see, so that's the Parley's Canyon Fire overview. Next piece that I wanted to address was the Marshall Fire in what they call the National Center for Atmospheric Research fire. These were both fires in Colorado in recent months. The Marshall Fire occurred on New Year's Eve in Colorado. A wildfire in Colorado on New Year's Eve. 500 to 600 homes were burned. 18,000 residents evacuated at the end of December. That's unprecedented. A lot of the folks who go out and do post-fire analyses are really kind of shaking their heads looking at this and just saying, we have not, this is like a whole new paradigm. We haven't seen this before. Fast forward to the end of March, and in a very close area, the National Center for Atmospheric Research experienced a similar type event. 19,000 people evacuated, homes burning at the end of March in Colorado. It's crazy talk. In conjunction with some of the recent large California fires that have been going on in recent years, one of the dynamics that we're starting to see is that insurance carriers are just tossing up their hands and they're saying, we can't accept that risk. There's homes burning in Colorado at the end of December, and these are not small homes. There's homes burning in California, and we're getting these 100,000 acre fires, etc. We're not going to be able to accept that risk. And so very much having a personal impact on HOAs, individual homeowners who, if they are able to get insurance at all, are finding their rates doubled, tripled, quadrupled, maybe up to 10 times what they're used to. This phenomenon is very much local here with some of the communities, and you all may have seen a recent KPCW article about a homeowner in Tollgate who was not able to get insurance because they said the risk is too high. We're not doing it. So that's an incoming phenomenon that we're starting to have to deal with. One of the big economic impacts for us in terms of as a community, Park City, Western Summit County, we are a tourist-based economy, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And while the physical aspects and the economic damages of just the fire alone would be, they'd be catastrophic in a large scale scenario. What we don't know is what the long-term economic impacts might look like. And for frame of reference, in the 90s, Yellowstone had a huge complex of fires that merged together, became a huge super mega fire. Took the forest about 5 years to return to pre-fire levels, because fire is part of the natural habitat. It's part of the cycle. It's good for forests. It's actually healthy. It took 10 years for tourist levels to return to pre-fire levels. What would that do to our community here when Mr. and Mrs. Smith from Chicago are deciding where to spend their hard-earned winter vacation dollars? The choices between Orlando or skiing in some burned up sticks, what's the choice going to be? So, and that has a long lasting impact. It can have a very long lasting impact. So very much a key consideration there. So what are we doing to address all of this? We've seen what the threat is. We know it can happen here. Well, we're doing a number of things. So in addition to some of the great work that our Park City Municipal Trails and Open Space team is doing in creating defensible space in our open lands, we are, and a number of our partners too, who I'll get to, in 2021, we updated our community wildfire preparedness plan. And at the end of 2021, Park City Municipal achieved FireWise certification, thanks to Travis. And so that's a pretty significant national level certification. Heinrich and crew are working on a community wildfire risk assessment, which I'll let him address in just a couple of minutes. We formed the Western Summit County Fuels Committee, which you'll hear a little bit more about, but designed to create a cooperative, collaborative environment where landowners of any shape and size are welcome to join this committee. And the idea is to create collaborative projects that provide the best long-lasting benefit or protection to the community in terms of wildfire fuels reduction. We reinstituted or reinvigorated the city's forestry advisory board, and we are working on a comprehensive forestry plan which will address healthy forests and how to mitigate some of these wildfires threatening the community. Rocky Mountain Power, some of you may know, has implemented what they call a public safety power shutoff program, where they will proactively de-energize equipment during high fire danger days and in certain high consequence areas, of which Park City has several. Let's see, we're examining federal and state grants, which you'll hear more about when Jess gets up here, to help defray the costs of doing some of this mitigation work. We finalized the city's first ever evacuation plan, designed to be scalable, flexible, and adaptable to the circumstances, but how do we get people out of town quickly in the event of a wildfire? And we will be holding a full-scale evacuation exercise at the end of September this year. Mark it on your calendars, Wednesday, September 28th from 9 to 1. We are welcoming community participation, and we will have a website where you can sign up and register and participate in an evacuation exercise with Park City Fire District, Park City Police, Summit County Sheriff, Public Safety Dispatch, and a whole host of supporting agencies, UHP and UDOT included. Let's see. And then a number of the homeowners associations in Western Summit County are just setting the bar high for us. These are some communities that have really gone above and beyond in implementing FireWise practices, as well as implementing some really great programs within the HOAs. So Summit Park, kind of on the front lines in terms of living in the wildland urban interface, has implemented a really good FireWise program. Pinebrook has as well, and they are continuing to do projects throughout their area in terms of fuel reduction. Let's see, Stagecoach Estates north of I-80, same thing. The Colony actually imposes HOA fees and dues, and they actually have not one but two crews that go around to all of their properties on a tri-annual basis doing mitigation work. Kind of a cool deal. All of their members reportedly are on board and fully in support of this, and they have a whole scheme in place. They have a whole plan in place or regimen in place where they will go through and they will assess properties on an annual basis, and they will say, okay, so here's what we need to do on your property this year. And then they'll be back and they reassess and they continue to control. So great example there. Promontory and Tollgate have both done some really good work in terms of fuel reduction. One of our most recent fuels committee meetings, they agreed on a cooperative project where their properties abutted, and they agreed they were going to do wildfire reduction or fuels mitigation work in those areas to help provide that protective benefit to their community. In addition, the resorts, both Deer Valley and Vail, are doing a ton of work on their properties. Deer Valley has a great plan, and they continue to implement. I don't see Steve Graff in the audience, but kudos to Steve and his team for doing that effort. As you may know, they did a whole pile burning series this winter when there was snow on the ground to get rid of a lot of the dead and dying stuff that was in their properties. And they continue to do great work throughout. And then as part of the lift upgrades, Vail is going to be doing fuels mitigation work in the areas of those new lifts going in as well. And that's what I have for you. As just mentioned, we will be revisiting pile burning towards the end of the season, and with Park City Fire's great help fighting fire with fire, talking about how to do that pile burning safely in a way that very quickly reduces the fuel load. And thank you all very much for being here, both in person and online. And I'll be here to answer questions after this.
My name is Brant Lucas. In addition to being a paramedic with Park City Fire, I'm also our community wildfire liaison, and a whole bunch of other things as well. So I'm going to be talking to you today really briefly just about operationally what we look like from a wildfire standpoint with Park City Fire, and then kind of the prevention end of what we do as well. So it's kind of a twofold, but I won't take up too much of your time here. So first, just what we have within the Park City Fire District, which all of you reside within the Park City Fire District if you're living here, so just so you know. So we've got 70 red carded firefighters. What that means is all of our firefighters have undergone that Wildland basic training. Many of our firefighters have gone on to do additional training beyond that, the core group of classes. So we've all received that training and know what to do, have the safety stuff down and everything like that. We've got 2 water tenders stationed throughout the district as well, 2 type 6 engines and 5 type 1-3 engines, which is on the left side over there, and parked out front is one of those as well. So kind of the off-road capabilities, you probably see our giant, road queens going around town that really we don't want to leave the pavement. They don't do well when they leave the asphalt. So whereas some of our type 1-3s handle a lot better in the dirt roads and sagebrush and things like that. So so that's what we've got around town. We are in the midst of upgrading the fleet constantly as well. So there's talks of an additional type 3 and just kind of updating what we have. So that is what we currently have stationed around the district right now. So what our response looks like is mainly initial attack. We're going to be the first in, right? We're down the street from you. We're your closest fire resource. You probably don't have a BLM, a Forest Service, or a state office with a hand crew right down the street from you, I'm going to guess. We are most certainly going to be the first there. So what that means is we aggressively start fighting the fire with the tools and resources that we have. We also size up the fire to see, do we need additional resources? There's a lot of these wildfires that we can handle just with our 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 person crew right there. We can take care of what it is, whether it just be on the side of the road or whatever it might be, a backyard little brush fire that's getting out of control. We're more than capable of handling a lot of that kind of stuff. Again, the Parley's fire, great example. That was far beyond our means, and what we did, we called for additional resources, right? We started fight, the aggressive firefighting operations, and I'll get into what that can look like. But we know when something's going to get out of our scope really quick, whether it's significantly wind driven or in fuels that we just can't get into. If it's in tall timber, like up on the resorts or Summit Park, that it gets out of our scope and something like that. Or we've got 60-mile-an-hour winds. We need aircraft for that. We know that's going to be above us, and so that's some of the training we've undergone as well, is recognizing that early. And again, the Parley's fire was a great example. We contacted the fire warden and let him know we need aircraft immediately, and that was one of the big factors in squashing that fire, was getting helicopters and type 1 aircraft on that as soon as we could. So yeah, that's what our initial response looks like. It's going to be quick. It's going to be down and dirty. Again, we're not the BLM. We're not some 20-person hand crew that rolls in, from the Forest Service. We're just right down the street. We could be on a medical call, and then 2 minutes later, we're on this. So lots of fun. So yeah, what that looks like though in your neighborhood, we get into some structured triage really quick. This is again is that really quick phase. There's a few different categories of this, and you can kind of think about what your home maybe looks like. But so the 3 categories of structured triage is it needs little protection. We can drive by and go, all right, this is an easy save. We don't need to do much here. The homeowner's done a ton of work, and I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, this is an easy no-brainer. And then needs some protection, but we can save it. Again, if it's just it's a simple little limbing or thinning, things like that, we can get involved. Or wow, these homeowners haven't really done anything in the 20 years they've owned this home. Their wood shake shingle is already on fire. They've got all kinds of debris and stuff under their untreated wood deck. We kind of know what we can do and what we can't do. So there's a couple of different ways that we can handle things, but if we don't have 2 weeks to put up new materials on your home and redo the stain and everything like that, then it's kind of beyond us. And again, this is triage, right? When you hear the word triage, it's down and dirty, it's quick. We don't have a lot of time there. So what some of these tactics look like, so we can get into like the chainsaw work, doing some thinning around the home. If you've got some brush that's just immediately around your house that we can handle pretty quickly, all of our trucks have chainsaws. We can get to that pretty quick. We can do some back burns, as you see in that slide. If there fire's coming up the hill, we can burn off some of the fuels you've got right around your house to potentially hold that fire in check from getting right there. I know it's, again, weird and a little counterintuitive, fire with fire. And as you heard earlier, we will get into that at the end of the season. But this is a great tactic that we use in the wildland world to potentially save a home. So, and then on that bottom picture, you see we're doing some progressive hose lays. So a really common tactic we do in structure protection is lining the whole house with hose, and then we'll have like lateral lines going off that. So if the fire is coming, we can put kind of a water curtain up and potentially make a stop. So yeah, those are kind of the basic ones. Things we're not going to get into. We're not going to wrap your home in tinfoil. The really cool stuff you see out there, we just don't have time for that, right? Like this is a full, like this takes hours and hours to do with a full crew. We're looking at something we can do in just a handful of minutes with 4 or 5 people potentially. So we're not going to get into wrapping homes, or there's just a couple things that we can't do. So it's more of a stay and play or prep and leave type situation for us. And then also like the time is really the biggest thing to consider with this. And we don't want to put ourselves in a bad spot, right? If you've got some long driveway that's overgrown and we're trying to back down a fire engine in the middle of a wildfire, that's not an ideal spot for us, right? Like our safety and your safety is the biggest thing. We're just not going to endanger ourselves or our crews. So we need to keep that in the forefront. And you should as well when you're prepping your home and doing, you know, some of this work and mitigation stuff around your house. I know it looks cool. Everyone loves like all the trees growing over everything. That's why we live here. But just keep that in mind. You know, would this be a safe environment for a fire crew to come in and potentially save my home or you if you're there? So, and that brings me to my next point. So, resources versus time. So, actually, no, that was not. That was also the one we talked about. So, some of the things that give us the best chance is creating that defensible space. These are all things from Firewise USA, which you'll hear a handful of times, but creating that defensible space with the 3 zones. That first zone, 0 to 5-3, really just no vegetation at all, whether it's bare earth or gravel. We just don't want, you know, shrubs right there, any tall grasses, things like that. So right up against the house. So it's, you know, combustible versus non-combustible materials. We want to avoid the combustible right up against combustible. So, and then when we talk about the zone 2, we're getting out a little further. It's thinning. That's that 5 to 30 feet where you just don't have any ladder fuels, and you've got, you know, more spacing between your trees. And then getting out into that 3rd zone, that's like 30 feet to 100 feet or your property line. And it's just, you know, more patchy little areas of trees, just not some dense forest, which I know is hard, right? We live in the forest, and that can be challenging at times. But again, you know, mitigating those ladder fuels so that, you know, we don't have the transfer from the ground fire up into the canopies. That's really, really big there. So, and then fire resistant landscaping, there's a whole slew of different plants and trees that you can utilize that are very moisture rich, and they're not sap rich. So I'm not going to get into that long list. There's a whole bunch of stuff that Utah State has published about different plants, and actually the nurseries in town I've talked to, they're really good at advising that as well. And that also, you know, speaks to, you know, just home hardening on your landscapes. You don't need some giant, amazing, lush greenery around there that potentially could dry out. If you do have that, keep it wet, which I know is a little hard to do in a drought. So just think about the landscaping you have around your home. And then a home hardening, which Dave's going to talk about later on, but this is just the materials of your home. Keeping, if they are combustible materials, keeping them treated and keeping them, you know, in good condition, or using stone, using metal, things like that. So I'm not going to go too far into it, but doing these things gives us the best chance to save your home. Going back to that structure triage, if you've taken advantage of these things and done that work, then we're going to go by your home and say, wow, we can make a stop here. We can save this home. So, yeah. Oh, I definitely missed a slide. Sorry. No, it's just not in here. It got missed altogether. So yeah, the resources versus time, we look at how many people we have on the ground, how many boots we have there. And if we can do that work with the people we have, given where the fire is and where it's coming from, we'll do whatever work we can do. So yeah, happy to answer any questions later about that. One case study that I did want to look at really quick, and Mike talked about this for a minute, but the Boulder fire in Colorado, I know, again, it was, you know, that kind of off season. This very much could happen here, though. I do want to impress that upon you. They did have a couple factors. Their precipitation and their temperatures were the highest they've been in many years. These two little graphs on the bottom highlight that, and their first and second were what they were at for their precipitation, or how dry they were and how hot it's been in that region. So they were at very high risk. The picture on the top has their wind speeds, and they were looking at winds around 80-85 miles an hour, and that was the biggest reason for that fire. After the start, you can see that picture on the left, it was just moving. I was curious myself and looked at some of the wind data in Park City, which I'm sure a lot of people look at all the time, right? And found that we have very often had pretty significant gusts in the area. So Parley Summit has had gusts up to 70. Up on the PCMR, we've had gusts of 120. In town on Main Street, we've had 100-mile-an-hour gusts. So it very could happen here. Yeah, very likely could happen. Just know that. So it's not unlikely. It could happen here. I look at that picture on the bottom left, and I think that's a handful of areas around here. So again, we're not sitting in these, critical areas of, precipitation and temperature, but we could definitely get there. It's not like we haven't had a prolonged drought for a long time. So just bear that in mind. Yeah. And so one of the bigger takeaways that I realized from the Marshall fire was, at a certain point, because you don't see a lot of sagebrush, big trees, things like that, the homes are what became the fuel. So again, we have areas like that around here. Park Meadows is a great example. We've got all these homes. We do have, big, golf course, greens and everything, fairways spaced out. But once the homes become that fuel, the fire can just take off. And when you've got winds 60 miles an hour plus, you just have transfer from home to home to home, as opposed to tree to tree to tree. And a lot of these fires, you'll see the trees are still standing afterwards, but the homes are gone. So that's really eye-opening to me. And you realize at that point that, it's not just a wildfire at that point. It's obviously, urban interface fire. So yeah, pretty eye-opening stuff. So talking about the community end of what we do, more on the prevention end. So taking care of your own home is first and foremost, right? And then kind of talking with your own HOAs to, have community days where you're, taking care of the common spaces or discussing what each homeowner is doing, that kind of stuff. I participate in those meetings all the time, and we get some great conversation. There's oftentimes some neighbor shaming, which I don't condone, but you do what you want to do. But there's a lot of good feedback and a lot of good, conversation that happens there. So again, with, your HOA meetings, having the experts come out and let you know, what's going on in the area, what, resources are available to you. That obviously then goes into the CWPP, which they talked about, the Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan. The biggest reasons for having that is it potentially opens up grant funding for you. So yeah, it's a great thing to have. Yeah, I recommend every community to have a CWPP. It kind of lays out the framework for direction in your community of what you want to do mitigation wise. If you've got some, common space areas that you feel are, problematic, there's consultants that can come in and say, wow, you should put a fuel break in here. You should have thinning here. You should do this there. So you can really develop a great strategy with these CWPPs. Another reason to have that is it's the biggest reason you can, it's one of the main criteria for becoming Firewise USA, which also opens up insurance breaks, potential grant funding, things like that. So the two here in Utah very much go hand in hand. The CWPP is required for that Firewise USA recognition. And I don't know if you've seen, but you get this really cool sign. You can make them really big. I'm hoping that Park City will have just some giant sign as you're coming into town that they're Firewise recognized. But yeah, it's a point of pride. When people drive into Summit Park and they see that Firewise USA, residents know, and tourists, people on the trails know that there's efforts, taking place there. So it's really cool. I'm a big fan of it. The state of Utah does have a CWPP template. Again, Travis Wright is kind of our regional expert on that, and he's happy to guide people and communities through that. So one other thing we have available, man, I wish these would have, never mind. So the impacts that we do have to Park City, obviously tourism, we've already talked about that for a second, but local businesses as well. talking with, you know, some of the other economic development people in Park City, it's multi-millions of dollars a month if we do have a wildfire. Aside from the $15 billion we have in residential property, just the tourism end of what we have here in Park City is multi-millions of dollars a month. So it's a big hit, you know, like Mike was saying, you know, families choose where they're going to go and things like that. And going to a burn scar is not near as enjoyable as, you know, going, maybe not Orlando, but somewhere else. Yeah. So, and then obviously property values, you know, potentially plummet as well. And insurance numbers go through the roof. It's a cascading effect. I mean, those residents that live out, you know, by that Parley's fire and Summit Park and Pine Brook and everyone can attest to, you know, the insurance companies are, you know, they're worried now. So if that happens at Deer Valley, if that happens, you know, other areas of Park City, insurance companies are probably going to be calling. So yeah, those are the more economic impacts. But then you talk about the environmental impacts. Obviously, burn scars are not very pleasing to anyone. And then the long-term effects of, you know, water and then soil erosion. We start to get mudslides. So it's this huge cascading effect. Our trails, our water, like those are two things we're very dependent on here. Like I'm here for the trails. And if there's mudslides across those, or those are damaged, I'm not going to be very happy. If our water is jeopardized by all these mudslides and fire and ash and things like that, it just has a very big cascading effect. So the prevention end of this is key of these wildfires, but also squashing them, you know, when they're in those incipient stages is also really important. So one program that we do offer here, and this is available to every resident within the Park City Fire District, is our chipping program. It's been wildly successful over the years. You can register as many times as you want. We will only come and chip one pile at a time. We won't come just to your house when you call. We have like a route that we go. But the specs on it, your pile's got to be 8 feet long, no more than 6 feet tall, and 8 feet wide. So yeah, and you can register at PCFD for any of those programs. And yeah, we're happy to come on out. So, and again, it'll be running. You can already get on now and register. You can already put a pile out if you want to, and we'll come back as many times as you register a pile throughout the summer. So yeah, that's all I got.
I don't know why you guys got the pleasure of me twice, but thank you for saying. Hi, I'm Jess Kirby. I'm the Summit County Public Lands Manager. Newly hired. It's a new position that the county brought on last year to kind of tackle a lot of these topics that are being discussed. Not only, you know, Brant just teed it up really nice with the watershed and the water dependence and how we're going to deal with large landscape scale, but also helping community to connect with grants and to just bring partnership and help. It's kind of a intermediate position where it's like, oh, you need to talk to you and we're going to get you together. So it's a really fun position to be in, and everybody's welcome to reach out and to me if, oh, this one's not mine. That's you. You want to go first? Okay, you go first. Sorry, we had a little mix up. So here's Heinrich.
Hi, everybody. Heinrich Dieters, Trails and Open Space for Park City Municipal. I don't know if I can read that font or you guys can. A lot of familiar faces. Thank you, first of all. I swear I'm not trying to brown nose right now, but if you weren't here in this audience, a lot of this doesn't happen. We do a lot of work that we clear, you know, do defensible space work on the city property, but the adjacent neighbor isn't doing anything, and whoever made the shaming category, there probably will be a bit of that in the future, but it really is, it's a two-way street, if you will. I mean, it's like noxious weeds that we work on a lot. The wildfire is just going to cross the property boundaries and stuff, so thank you very much for coming. The city is one of the largest landowners here. Obviously, the resorts, Deer Valley and Park City Mountain. The city, we're at about 6,000 acres of open space. Some of that is in Bonanza Flat and a little bit is actually still in Summit County, but you get the point. I manage most of that property for all those different reasons. So IMU for the city, that's my scope, and I'm hoping to explain sort of what we do, and then you can ask questions associated later. Defensible space, Brant hit on. He put a great little diagram, but you can see mine up there. He went, you know, from the you know, out to 5, 10 feet. Sorry, I don't know zone 1 and zone 2. I know zone 3. Zone 3 is basically what we do in our adjacent open space. This is where your structure is within 100 feet of where like it goes onto the city property. We have done significant work over the probably past 10, 11 years. I kind of date myself. I can't remember how long I've actually been at the city. But the focus has been Solomir, the Airy, different areas around, a little bit around the Clark Ranch front side over on 40 and stuff. You know, we probably only do about 4 or 5 acres every year in the past. It wasn't a huge program. Wildfire, actually, we're a little bit behind. No offense to everybody with badges on here or anybody in this. Like, I think Utah's probably a little bit behind some of the other states. It's not our fault. We're doing a good job getting, you know, back out in front of it. And so we've been doing that work associated with that area. You can see those. But we're kind of in a sense almost like running out of city open space to do that work. You'll be familiar with the Round Valley area. You know, there's not a lot of homes, you know, adjacent to that area. So we haven't done work out there. Bonanza Flat, we really haven't done much work, you know, in that area. But the areas that we will be focusing on this year, we'll do a little bit more work on Rossi Hill. We're looking at sort of the Marsac Canyon area. So there's the large Huntsman property there. There's Lookout, a couple of things. We don't really have property in that area, but we're trying to work with like UDOT and a couple different aspects. We're concerned about the same thing, the heated vehicles, whether they're going down with the brakes or going up with catalytic converters, working on that. But we will be doing an extreme amount, extreme is probably the wrong term, I apologize. We'll be doing a lot of work on Treasure Hill. So you'll know if you live here that the city purchased that a few years back. There was some bond monies left over from that. And so that's going to fund probably about a 50 or 60 acre section. So when you look up at that hillside, a lot of the conifers in that area, we're going to be doing a lot of work in that area. So if we can get it done, it's a lot of work. Obviously, try to work when conditions are most appropriate, but that'll be a lot of focus. And then anybody here from Daly Canyon? Yeah. Good for you. We'll be working in your backyard, so I apologize. I'll get you set up.
My backyard is 5 feet. That zone 1 is Park City property.
Yeah.
It's that mountain.
I'm going to give you that 3 feet then, and I'll take the rest in the back. But we're going to be working on in that area pretty significantly this year. That has been, you know, we've used the state sort of prioritization method, which has been extremely, extremely helpful. There's a lot of information out there to prioritize our projects, but we'll be in your backyard a fair amount.
How can we help?
We'll talk later. Does that sound good? I think I just verbatim sort of like what we're doing in open space on our properties. Can you go to the next slide? Who's in charge? Whoa. What do I do? Hit the button? Okay. Can I make that video play? Ryan, you had technical difficulties. Can I scope on that and get this to play? No way. If this works, I'm walking out. It is. So I'm proud of this. A lot of these guys do this for a living, but like for someone who has never had prescribed or pile burning on properties right in the middle of your $64 million open space and adjacent to like multi-million-dollar homes, I was freaking out. But this is on this is on Treasure. And this was December 20th, I think, this year. So we did some significant work in Rossi Hill and Treasure, like I said, some clearing. And it was the first time that we used, sorry, I'm staying close, pile burning as a method. You know, as the city moved through this process, we would go and we would do clearing and we'd ask residents if we could drag everything through their backyard and out to the street and we'd either chip it or something like this. This was the first time with the assistance, technical assistance, a lot of the people here, and I can't thank them enough, that our contractors successfully burned, I want to say they did 40 or so piles this year. Sorry, I don't have that number in front of me. But we didn't get one complaint, one call to the radio station, one call to fire district, I think. Maybe it was December 20th and nobody was in town, but it was very successful. So we'll be looking to use this method a lot more often because it is very, it's not as resource intensive. Segue real quick. The other aspect that I do for the city is try to help with the planning efforts. So you heard about the CWPP, you heard about Firewise Communities. City Council last Thursday evening approved a rather large contract to do a community wildfire risk assessment. So that is important in the sense for many of the same reasons that were touched on today. So one is we're going to take a really deep dive on sort of the comprehensive sort of vegetation types, the baseline of what's out there, whether it's the natural environment, the watershed areas, the vegetation types, the slopes, the avalanche terrain, numerous different aspects. And the deliverable for a lot of that is a map, if you will, but it's not a map at 30,000 feet. It's a map at a local level. So you can see your property and you can kind of, gauge, what efforts you may need to do, like on your property and your property boundaries. So that will be a tool that hopefully the city will fund and then the community can use and the HOAs can use. The second aspect is it'll prioritize. We can't get to everything. I do get a lot of calls. Will you please do? I'm looking at Rick right now. Can you please help out and do work in our area or help us out in certain places? We can't get to everything at once, right? There's limited funds and really there's limited contractors and there's limited time to actually do this, almost like a building season. So we have to prioritize our efforts, biggest bang for the buck. This is a multi-year endeavor. We've started on it and I think we're doing all right. We're a little bit behind. Maybe I should stop saying that. Maybe that's my own chip on the shoulder. I wish we were a little bit further ahead in our community, but we're going to make up the time, but we do have to prioritize other things. So that's going to help. Brant touched on, this is a huge tool, I believe, to help us get those federal and state grants, right? If we can show that if you hear the term shovel ready, right, that might be a wrong term in wildfire mitigation, but doing capital projects when you're going for grants, a lot of times people say, is it shovel ready? You're ready to go, the plan's there, you know what you're gonna do. This is gonna help us get shovel ready. And then this is your plan as well. This is gonna take a year. We're looking at about April of 23 to adopt that. So we're going to continue work this year. Actually, the mitigation efforts, we're not going to stop, like I said earlier. But there's going to be a lot of community input. So we need you to participate in these and let us know how you feel, what you want to see, what tools are going to be helpful to the HOAs or the individuals. So again, my name's Heinrich Dieters. I work at Park City Municipal. You should be able to find me either on the city website or I'll hang out and I don't have any cards. I'm not that old school, but I'll at least give you my phone number. I'm on a contact sheet in the back. Thank you, Sheree. And it'll be on the last slide. So thank you very much.
So he's not going to introduce me, right? I introduced him. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay, now I'm back. So yeah, I'm not going to introduce myself, but Summit County, there's my name, and just to talk about what we're going to focus on. So I've been asked to talk about the collaboration and funding piece that the county can help bring to the city and others that are in the community, and our county mitigation plans that are close to the city boundaries and what we're doing outside of the city and the other parts of our county. The neighborhood action and your personal responsibility, I think Heinrich is just speaking about that, and we can't be everywhere. We need your help. This is something that we have to do together as a community, and having everybody buy into it is going to be the success of our story. And then FireWise and what's a fire adapted community. So stakeholders, it's right there, all lands, all hands. That's what we need. We need everybody's cooperation. We need everybody's attention. We need everybody to help in this, everybody's sweat equity. Or if you can't do sweat equity, donations help as well. This is not a cheap thing to do. Heinrich just alluded to his multi-million-dollar contract to just get the planning done, right? And then there's implementation after that. So we just have to all keep in mind that this is a long-term marathon, not a short race. And it's a little tough to, say, why are you doing it here and not here? Or why are you doing it there and not there? Well, it's, again, back to that planning piece. We have to choose what, we rely on a lot of modeling. We rely on, what happens in fires and then our stakeholders and education. It's just a big group effort. And, I put some partners down here. This is who the county and the city is part of this as well, working with on some projects around our county, but it's spreading like wildfire, pun intended, right? This is a new paradigm that we're in. And, learning that adaptive management is part of the process of how we're going to deal with our lands is just a new thing that we're all going to have to get used to. We've spent the last 100 years saying, put it out quick, you know, no fire, it's bad. You know, Smokey says no. So now we're saying, okay, we got to rethink that, right? And so it's that paradigm shift. So we're all have to educate ourselves and be part of it. But the education series that we're starting today is part of that education and you know, bringing that word out and, you know, showing the different parts and pieces of what planning and mitigation is. Mike already touched on the Western Summit County Fuels Committee and the work that we're doing there, hoping to expand that wider as we go and bring in more folks from around the county. The wildfire and watershed restoration project I'll talk about a little bit more. And then some community stakeholder meetings along with what Park City is doing. The county will be working on some stakeholder meetings as well. And so there's going to be a lot of what feels like redundancy, but we're all trying to just gain that information and figure out what's the best plan for our community. So here's a bit of what's going on with outreach. A flyer is there that can be found online. I've just learned about Bitsly. It's a new way of shortening your website. So it's a Bitly wildfire series, and that's on a flyer in the back, or everybody knows how to use a QR code thanks to COVID. So that's there as well. Already went through the series before, but just want to let you know, we did host a congressional tour on Monday with some congressmen from Blake Moore's office, Curtis's office, and Romney's office. We're trying to get some good attention on our county and the great work we're doing to bring funding to us and to try to figure out how we can accelerate both pace and scale on what we're all working on as a common theme. And then again, those stakeholder meetings, those are kind of some topics that we're looking into, you know, what's the need? You know, what do you see as the need? We can stand up here and tell you what we think, but we really want to know what does the community need? It's important for you to have that say in the process. And then, you know, what is wildfire resilience and what does watershed mean? What does landscape scale mean? And what are the climate and, you know, human impacts of doing this work? You know, there's always an impact of what you do, whether you do nothing or if you do something. So let's weigh those out. And then, you know, again, going back to this fire adapted community. Part of the stakeholders in education is the emergency alerts. Wanted to make sure this is a good screenshot to just take a picture of if you're not signed up, but go to summitcountyalerts.org. We'll get you there, or you can actually text the SC fire info to 88777, and those will give you wildfire specific alerts. A lot of us were getting those during the Parley's fire. You'll hear Mike's voice on your voicemails and through those texts. It's a great thing. But then new this year, and this was an outcome of the Parley's fire, and a lot of the community input that the county took is, you know, there wasn't a way to communicate with the Spanish speaking population in our community. And so we've created the Summit County Spanish alerts as well. So spread that with any folks that you know who would need that resource. And then funding. It's always, again, the big elephant in the room that you have to bite off at once. But you know, it's about partnership, it's about collaboration, it's about, you know, tearing down that redundancy and figuring out how you can join and partner. And as you go bigger and broader into your scope of these funding reaches, you tend to get a little bit more attention and some more funding opportunities that come to it. And so the federal funding that's not really meant to be a slash through. Those federal funding opportunities, you know, FEMA is an opportunity for us to go after some wildfire funds. Right now we're working on two communities in Summit County, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. NRCS, which is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, there we go. They're instrumental in providing non-point source funding, which is kind of a technical way of saying when something happens here, you have an impact down here, you know, debris flow and stuff like that. So they put a lot of funding into it. Water Smart grants are another way to look at it. And you'll see that a lot of this is circled around water and watershed, and why is it not focused on fuels and fire? Well, it's all connected, right? You know, our watershed has our forests. If our forests aren't there, our watershed's impacted. If, you know, you have no vegetation, then you're going to have more impacts on your water system. So again, a lot of these grants circle and focus on that water aspect because it's kind of that pin that holds it all together. And then state and local resources, we have the watershed restoration initiative, something that our legislature just codified this year as a formal organization, and hopefully we'll be funding that significantly going into the future. It's put a lot of money on the ground in Summit County so far. The work in Summit Park was part of that project. Pine Brook is receiving funding this year from that grant. They've done a ton of work up in the Provo watershed, actually 7 years worth of work. And I think it's like, what, 20,000 acres that has been treated up there to protect the Provo water source and watershed at the headwaters. And then we're moving back over into the Weber watershed with some of that funding as well. Collaborations and coalitions and collaborations, I think I flipped that. COCO is their acronym, but they're a local source out of Colorado who's really instrumental in getting funding to the local level for capacity building. And so if you have a program that needs another firefighter to come in and do something, or if Brant needs to stand up a wildland crew, he can go and bring a plan to COCO and they'll help with that capacity level. LRS is a landscape scale restoration project that the state puts together. We do have an application in for that this year again. We were unsuccessful last year, but really close, so hoping to get it this year. And then adaptive communities, which I think I mentioned, funded some of the media and education pieces for this series. So they put some funding into that. And then Summit County wildfire resilience. And what does that mean? It's something that the county is tackling to figure out how we can compile funds into one big pool that can be leveraged for other grant funds. A lot of times when you go after funds, you need a significant match. And having that shovel ready is one way that you can get those funding. And so we're trying to pull funds from private donations, corporate donation, different federal state grants. And then we have an endowment piece that we're hoping to create a long-term sustainable piece of a funding pool for our whole community countywide to go in for retreatment, to go for long-term leveraging for other grants. It's never going to pay for the whole system, but it's going to give us a 1 foot up on how we go into the future with this. And that's just a quick little diagram of what that resilience fund looks like. My little cheesy puzzle piece picture, but that's really what it's about, right? Everybody has a skill and has a benefit to bring to the table. And if we can all get it together, it makes a great picture, and we can do it. But it's that working together, and it's that public-private partnership. And watershed scale, looking at something beyond just your backyard. If you just do it in your backyard, what happens to your neighbor? So if you do it to yours, you say, hey, you want to do yours too? And I'll show you how I did mine, and so it's contagious, right? And making sure that you can keep that going. And then having a governance structure and how are we going to distribute these funds? So this stuff is all coming down the line in the next few years. More information will be coming. So what are we doing in our community outside of the Park City limits? We're working with 5 HOAs right now, getting funding, and all these HOAs are bringing significant funds to the table as far as match. Most of these, all of them were shovel-ready projects, meaning that they were organized. They had put an assessment fee. I think someone mentioned that Colony has an assessment fee. Well, so does Tollgate, and so does Sun Peak. So it doesn't just mean our Colony, what's that? Oh, and Pine Brook also, thank you. And Summit Park has a small one as well, even though they're not a super organized, or not organized, but they're partial HOA, I guess I should say that. And it's having folks that want to get the work done, getting the word out, organizing your community, and then making yourself known. So these communities had come to me as in my position at the county and said, hey, we're ready, but we only have this much and we need this much. How can we leverage this? What can we do? And just by having that interaction with us when these opportunities came, we were able to jump on them and help the communities get it. But again, it's that self-assessment, it's that wildfire fee, and then they track their in-kind hours. It's really important as an HOA or as a, not even an HOA, if just an organized community, if you don't have an HOA, you can still get with your community members and say, all right, let's have a work day. And then keep track of those hours, because those hours can be used as in-kind match for grants later on. So keeping track of name, date, and a sign-in sheet. FEMA requires a physical sign-in sheet. So those kind of details just kind of need to be part of your organization for funding. So here are the 5 communities that we're working with. Sun Peak, Pine Meadows, which is up in Tollgate Canyon, Summit Park, Pine Brook, and Alpine Acres, which is at the very top of the Weber watershed in Weber Canyon. And then talking about the Resilience Fund and the Weber project, this is really about forest to faucets. We've been asked a lot, why is the county focusing on the headwaters of the Weber and not working around homes in Park City? And it's already been said, you know, water is our biggest challenge right now. We're in a drought. Summit County has 8 headwaters of the Wasatch Front and back, and Colorado, you know, we impact Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and the Wasatch Front. I mean, the amount of people you can add up, it's like 1.5 million just on our Wasatch Front that is reliant on the water and the forests that we have in our county. So it's kind of a big responsibility, but shouldn't really have to be paid by our citizens alone. You know, there's a lot of beneficiaries. And so that's what our county is working on, is trying to figure out, how do we make this equitable? How do we make all the beneficiaries help with this, you know, this work? The headwaters that we're focusing on is right there in the bottom, and I apologize, it's kind of small, but you'll see Oakley is kind of in the center there on the flat, and then Weber Canyon up to the top. So we're putting our efforts and works in there, working really closely with the U.S. Forest Service and the Department of Natural Resources, Forestry, Fire, State Lands. Ryan's gonna help us out a ton too, yeah. But anyway, we're getting together, we're trying to find target areas, we're working with USU to figure out, you know, where is to strategically put these treatments? How can we offset the impacts of fire when it comes, you know, if the fire happens here, if we put a treatment there, is it going to stop the debris flow into the river? Really what we're just trying to do is protect that intake at Rockport that brings us all, you know, I think it was like 3/4 of the culinary water that comes into Park City. If that shuts down, it takes 3 hours from Rockport to the treatment plant up at Signal Hill. Is it Signal Hill? Yeah, can't remember. So 3 hours, one event shuts it down in 3 hours. And then what do? We have wells. There are different wells in the area, but it's something to think about. You know, we really do need to protect not only around our homes, but in our open space, our zone 3s and 4s and 5s and everything out and beyond. Yeah. And then to talk about the Western Summit County Fuels Committee, one of the things we're doing is compiling the work that is being done in the community, so we can have a map that's showing, well, if I live in this area, how can I tie into something that somebody else did? And that's that landscape scale, you know, trying to figure out how can we get our biggest bang for our buck? How can we extend this stuff beyond just what we're doing? And if anybody's interested in joining that committee, you can send an email to Mike and he will get you going. We are looking for like a dedicated representative from each HOA, just to keep the committee at a manageable size. And then, you know, what's fire adaptive communities? We've talked a lot about, you know, FireWise and CWPPs, but there's, you know, those are certifications or documents that you put together. And I think a lot of times people get to that step and they say, okay, we're done, we're FireWise, you know. And I think fire adaptive communities came out of that, and the fact that this is a long-term, this is a way of life, it's a way of living, it's every piece of the puzzle, it's the public, it's the landscape, it's the residents, it's the response, it's the safety, you know, it's this pinwheel is just, it's a resource in itself. But the best thing about this learning network, it's all free. So, you know, take note of this fireadaptivenetwork.org. They have presentations and videos, and there's English and Spanish resources. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. They already read it. They invented it right there. You know, go there, use their resources, share, it's all out public. They want you to share it. They need you to share it. Take it to your HOA meetings and say, let's be fire adaptive. Let's not just be fire wise, let's be fire adaptive. So I hope to send you all home with that resource. And then just one little other piece that's going on right now is we've talked about burning piles. We've talked about the amount of work that it takes to move this you know, the remains of these treatments around. And, you know, what do we do with all this stuff? There was one project in, I think that was the Provo fire, there was like 22,000 piles that had to be burned. Like, that's a lot of material. So what if we had another way to do it, you know, something to do with that? And so accessible, there's that word accessible, I put quotes around it, because sometimes you can get into these treatment areas and it's not super accessible. And so it's not the best way to do it. But in situations where you can get the material out, we are considering putting together a biomass facility in the county and revitalizing an industry, you know, possibly in Camas, where, you know, we used to have timber industry or, you know, sawmills, you know, that skill set and that capacity need and good jobs, and, you know, bringing that back to our rural part of the county is something we're looking into. So more to come on that. We are going through something called a BDOZ analysis right now. We're just signing the contracts today to figure out if we have enough mass to support a facility like this. And in the future, it could possibly take up some, you know, of our garbage or food waste. And so it's a part of that climate and green energy piece that our sustainability office is working on. So more to come on that. And that's all I had. There's my contact. If anybody needs to get a hold of me, happy to answer questions later.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everyone who's participated tonight. I'm Dave Thacker. I'm the Chief Building Official and Fire Code Official for Park City. Very excited to be here, and I just wanted to give a big thanks to Sherry Wellman, who started the meeting. She organized the majority of this, working with everyone else. So thank you, Sherry. She's put in a lot of work. So if we could all give her just a quick round of applause. We've been working as a city to look at ways we can educate about the Wildland Urban Interface Code. It's talked about a lot. It's thrown out there. We've heard bits and pieces about it, but how do we get more information out? And one of the questions that we asked when we were discussing that is, what do people know? Do we know what people need to know and what they want to know? And so we did send out a survey recently. Hopefully folks here were able to see that and take that. The results we received were eye-opening to me. For the most part, people wanted to know more about the basics and didn't know a lot about what the Wildland Urban Interface Code is. And I don't know if that's this group or if that's different group, but we're going to kind of talk about some of that and how it applies to your property specifically. We've heard a lot about open space and open lands and the larger picture, and those are all very, very important pieces that take a lot and take everyone to work on. But we can do our part on our properties as we just look at what we have and what's around us. You know, we talk about Daly Canyon and those properties that only have a small backyard or a small side yard. How do we do anything beyond our property lines, right? The answer is we really don't have the authority to do that. And that's where Heinrich and a lot of others are coming in to assist with getting some of those open spaces and areas around our homes beyond our property lines. But if we can examine what we have internally within those property lines, it'll really help us get where we need to be and accomplish that community goal. So what I wanted to talk about, and we've heard a lot about it, is defensible space. And Brant brought it up, and I think it's a couple of others have touched on it, right? There are 3 zones within our defensible space. That first zone that we want to talk about, well, we'll get into the zones in a minute. I'm a slide ahead of myself. But we look at these 2 photos, right? One that has a lot of landscaping and brush next to the home, and then one that has had some work done around it that does create that space. We want to create that space around the home so that these folks up here, Brant's teams, the Wildfire teams, can have a chance to protect your structure, and you're doing your part to assist them with protecting your structure. We want to consider, obviously, the ignition zones that I'll be talking about here in just a moment, the ladder fuels that lead to your homes, We want to talk about clumping, clustering, and thinning and what that means on your property, and then pruning and raking. All words we've all heard, all things we've probably all seen, but we want to kind of touch on those a little bit. This slide shows a little bit more about those zones. The intermediate zone is right around your home. It's 0 to 5 feet. The immediate zone. The intermediate zone is 5 to 30 feet. If I could read, we'd get that right. I guess I had to focus my glasses. Extended zone is 30 to 100 feet. You know, there are a lot of properties, as I just mentioned, within Park City proper and some within the county that don't have that 30 to 100 feet zone, right? And so we want to be able to at least take care of what we can and within those zones. What we're looking for, as Brant mentioned, within that immediate zone is we want as little as possible. We want the structure itself to be able to have the air around it, be able to breathe, withstand some of the heat that's coming that way. The intermediate zone, we want to be realistic. Obviously, we'll have some there. And then the extended zone, we're going to have more, but that's where the clumping and clustering comes into play, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. Fire spreads a lot through ladder fuels. We heard some of that before. What are ladder fuels is the question that we've also heard. Ladder fuels are exactly what you would assume a ladder is, right? As we climb a ladder, we start at the bottom rung and we climb up and get higher. These ladder fuels are what starts, maybe the grasses that moves to a bush, that moves to a small shrub, that moves to a small tree, and then a tree, and then all of a sudden you're in a canopy, right? We're building up, and then we're hopping from canopy to canopy, and it's something that is harder to mitigate, which is something these experts have to do. I don't ever have to do that, thankfully. I'll put all my trust in these guys, and they're good at it. But we want to mitigate those fuels so that fire can have a break. We have a break somewhere that's going to stop that and not feed that fire as it moves forward. Some of the other practices that we have are clumping, clustering, and thinning. And here are some examples of that. Clumping would be, allowing some of those trees to be together. The right-hand side of that kind of shows some of that clumping and clustering, keeping those trees together but not engulfed in that whole circular area. And this talks about on the right side in that box, right? We talk about clustering no more than 5 trees or shrubs together, trying to keep it small and workable, maintaining 18 feet between them. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes that's not. And then maintaining 12 feet distance between clusters in the extended ignition zone. Now, a lot of the things that we've heard related to some of these suggestions and Wildland Urban Interface Code requirements is, but the Park City Landscaping Code requires something different. We understand that. We're working through that. We're making some mitigation efforts to adjust that. Our planning department has just presented, I believe they presented to the Planning Commission, some fire-wise practices that will be going to the City Council to be discussed and adopted there as well. So we are working through how we can better align what our land management code requires and our Wildland Urban Interface Code requires. Pruning and raking is just that, right? We want to be able to prune our trees, keep the distance between the canopy of the tree and the properties of the homes that we have, and also be able to rake some of that dead and dying or that debris that's on the ground away from our homes and keep that space clear and clean. This is something we talk about annually here in Park City. The last few years, I'd say 4 out of the last 5, from my recollection, we've implemented an open flame and fireworks restriction or ban, if you will, throughout the community. That's likely to continue this year based on what we're seeing and forecasting. What that looks like is we really restrict anything that's outside of a personal barbecue that has been approved and located. Now, that said, we know there are a lot of fire pits that have been permitted and installed according to a lot of our fire code and Wildland Urban Interface Code practices. Those ones per permitted use can be used within the community. However, we want that to be permitted so that we can notify the proper authorities so they can know what's going on and we can work through that. More to come on that. We haven't gone through that process yet, but we will be going to City Council to discuss that in a near future date. Just more pictures of what we can and can't do there. Obviously, the open flames we do not want to have within our backyards for those barbecues. Yeah, home hardening. This is just something we're going to suggest. Go ahead and build a moat and see if you can just, reclad your home with some of these stones. Something that we've all talked about, home hardening is a very key and in some cases, arguably one of the better ways to defend against wildfire. Not perfect, but better, right? Obviously, defensible space and home hardening combined are the best, but home hardening is great. So what is home hardening? A 101 scenario is just really looking at your home and evaluating what you've got, making sure your gutters are clean. Any firewood storage that you have is away from your home. The underside of your decks is clear of dead leaves, other sticks and debris that could be flammable or burn. We want to make sure that any dead vegetation around your property is pulled out. Brant and I went and did a evaluation of a property within Park City, and it was one of the cleaner properties. I think Brant said, "I don't know why we're here. This is great." I think it is, but one of the things I learned from Brant as we were walking through that property is they did have some decks that were elevated above the ground about 20, 24 inches. And one of the suggestions that Brant made was, maybe we could close that front off so that nothing can blow underneath it, because it was about a 6 to 10 foot space that can accumulate a lot of that dead and dying, which can become a challenge. And so putting things in front to secure and alleviate some of that redundant maintenance that needs to be done over time is definitely something that can be done. A home hardening 201, or maybe a next step, is to look at your home a little differently. What do my eaves look like? What does my soffit look like? Do I have areas where firebrands or fire itself could get, and it could heat up and cause a fire? What does my venting look like? Do I have open vents? If I do, maybe I could put a little bit of a tighter mesh around those so that firebrands, if they are blowing, don't get inside and then continue to ember and burn. Looking at your roof type, if we've got wood shake or wood shingles on our home, are they rated? Do they have a fire treated coating on them? If not, is it time for them to be replaced? And if it's time for them to be replaced, can we consider a Class A roof type, a fire resistant rated roof type, or some type of an asphalt shingle that is much better for our type of environment, as opposed to the attractive and kind of that mountainous wood shake shingle look that is all throughout town. Within Park City, we have recently adopted, and it was in 2019, I believe, we adopted the Wildland Urban Interface Code, 2020, thanks. And we adopted it, well, let me take one step back. The state has adopted the 2006 Wildland Urban Interface Code and given local jurisdictions the authority to amend that code so that it meets the requirements of the community. So we worked with Summit County, with Park City Fire District, to make sure that our codes were aligning as much as we could, because we do have a lot of similar areas and a lot of differences. But we wanted to make sure that going from one place to another is not hugely different. And as we looked at what we were doing, we were able to make a lot of modifications. The code as written requires all properties, regardless of when it was constructed, to meet the code. We knew that that was a big bite of the apple, and that's something that would probably not go over well with the community. And so we looked at that and we decided that we're going to start with, and what we've adopted is new structures. So new properties that are being built are required to meet the Wildland Urban Interface as adopted by Park City. We also looked at some of the retrofits and renovations that take place within the city. And the code was adopted to read that any renovation or retrofit or addition of a property or home that exceeds $50,000 in valuation would then be required to meet the Wildland Urban Interface Code as written as well, as adopted as well. And so we're catching a lot of properties through that code. We're evaluating and looking at ways we can continue to enhance that and what it might look like to require that even further with some of the properties that maybe need it more, dependent upon areas, dependent upon what we find from some of these studies that will be coming out in the near future, and how we can implement those and give homeowners a little bit of time to come into compliance. There's more to come with that. There will be more outreach. It's not something we're going to just adopt and push forward, but we will be asking for some thoughts and ideas based on where we feel like it'd be best to go as a community to ensure that we're implementing all of that. together. One of the other questions that we get asked a lot related to the Wildland Urban Interface Code applies to the limits of disturbance areas, or LOD areas as they're commonly referred to. Each property within Park City proper does have a limits of disturbance area. Some of those properties, it's the property line. So your whole property is within that area. Some are limited to a smaller portion or percentage of that property. We have adopted our Wildland Urban Interface Code to allow exceptions to the staying within that limits of disturbance area. Now, that's not a green light, so don't run out and start chopping down trees or clearing areas that are outside that LOD area. Please come and talk to us, and we'll discuss kind of limitations we've put on that. Basically, and really high level, what we're looking at maintaining outside of that limits of disturbance area is keeping the grasses to a minimum height, trimming and removing the dead and dying from trees and any downfall, and then also limbing trees up to a certain area dependent upon the size and height of the tree. Those are just a few of the basic ones, but what we want to be sure is that we're working hand in hand and partnering through that. We did have a couple of properties that when they read this, they just went out and cleared their property and then started over, and it's definitely not the direction we're going. We're not trying to take away vegetation by any means. We just want to make sure that we're getting somewhere safely, hand in hand, and working through it together. So those are items that we'd love to be able to talk through with you, and our planning department is well versed in that, based on, and they can show you where your LODs are if you're unaware. We can also help you in the building department. As you come in, we can show you what plans we have on file if we have any, kind of talk through what that looks like. We've got a great vegetation list, which can help you understand what vegetation is approved and encouraged in these areas. And then we can also talk through what it really looks like for you and your property. These are just a couple of pictures that were put in a slideshow that Sherry put together a while ago that I thought were very indicative of what we're seeing in some properties and what we like to look at. So these properties obviously need a little bit of help. We've got some dead and dying right next to the structures. We've got brush. We have a lot of ladder fuels in each example here. And then here are a couple that are maybe not perfectly compliant, but they are much more compliant. And as you look at the picture on the right, as you kind of look up the hill in the background there, you can see that even the work that's been done there with limbing and reducing ladder fuels and removing any dead and dying really makes a difference. And it makes a difference so much so that if you look here, you can see a home that, you know, whether it was work done by the property owner or not, the home itself didn't have a lot around it. But you can see a lot of the charring from the fire that did go almost all the way around that home. You can see kind of on the left-hand side in the back, it looked like they had some type of a accessory structure there that didn't have that luxury of the Wildland Urban Interface compliance. And so it did not make it, it looks like, but the rest of it did. And so you can see how beneficial it really is. As Brant mentioned and others have mentioned, I don't think the Wildland Urban Interface Code is the end-all be-all that's going to solve every problem. There are fires, there are conditions that it just won't do much for. That said, it's better to give it a shot and be able to solve what we can, right? If we have winds like we did in the Marshall fire, it's not as beneficial. But if we have just a Parley's fire type scenario, you bet it's going to help save a lot of structures. And we want to be able to be your partner in getting that and saving those. And so one thing that I do want to throw out that hasn't been mentioned tonight is assessments, property assessments. How do we look at properties? The fire district, they've been willing to go out and look at properties. They've got such a large area in the county. We also, we've got Sherry Wellman, Brian Arnold, and myself at the Park City Building Department that we will come out and do assessments on properties as well. We're happy to go over them with you. One of the things that we've been asking is that if you'd like an individual property assessment and you have an established HOA, we would ask that it become an HOA friendly meeting, if you will, so that we can all go and talk to everybody. Because as we look at one property specifically, there's a lot that will apply to the properties that are near the property we're evaluating. And so it'd be good as an educational tool. We're also happy to attend HOA meetings and discuss things like that and do a site visit through that as well. So there will be more slides with some contact info that can help you understand how to get those set up and asked for, but we're more than happy to do that. and assist through anything that you've got. And that was my presentation. So I'll turn it back over to, oh, I won't turn it back over to Shay. So now that was actually the last. Aren't you glad? That was great. Thank you all for sticking through. We do want to open it up for questions. The panel is still here, and as mentioned before, we've got others. We've got the Summit County Fire Warden, Bryce Boyer. We've got Travis Wright from the state. We've got all the panel that was here. So if there are questions that you'd like to ask, we'd like you, just because we are virtual and in person, that if you have one, that you come up to this mic and ask it there, and we can definitely take it. If you don't have any, we can also do kind of meet and greets up front in person if you just like to come up and wouldn't like to ask the group. And while you're coming up to ask questions, I'm going to put the contact info on the slide if you'd like to take a photo of that. Additionally, there's more info in the back that has contact information.
Hi there. I just want to say thank you again for the save last summer. I know how lucky we are. I know weather was on our side, but I also know it was because a lot of the work that you all did. So thank you very much for that. I just have a couple of comments. One, I dig the pivot to waste as a resource with the potential for what we can garnish from all of the slash piles. Two, I just want to emphasize, I was at the panel last summer, and I want to say how much I would have appreciated. I am in Prospector. You know, maybe if a fire is burning within 20 miles of my house, I'd still like to know about that. Because if I'm, within a few hours of the area and I can get home, I want to do that, load my car, get my pets, all that stuff. So I just want to stress how much I would really like to have text alerts saying maybe they're isolated and say, for the people in Prospector, this fire is within 10 miles of your home or something like that. And then the other thing, I'm a landscape contractor, so we both construct landscapes and we tend them as well. I think this would be great information for licensing. Every 2 years, contractors have to license. And can I tell you, I have to pay for information I've been paying for 15 years. It's the same stuff. Something happened a couple years ago, and they limited the number of courses that count for our CEUs and to relicense. This would be fantastic for landscapers. And then secondly, I have a question about, I have a wood fence that adjoins my property and wood decks. And I would like to know, I feel like in one of the first presentations that somebody alluded to something an untreated deck or something. I'd love to know more about that. Thanks.
Yeah, since I'm standing, I'll throw it out there. There are a lot of different types of treatments you can put on your existing wood that assists in slowing the burn, if you will, fire retardant and other types of treatments. So they're out there. There are a lot of them. I'd be happy to help you find a few that have been used successfully locally. If you're looking closely, come up and we'll talk later.
I'll say regarding the alerts noted, and I'll work with our
I live in Pine Brook on Toll Canyon, so I'm very concerned about the possibility of insurance cancellation. I'm wondering if you have some suggestions on a strategy for working with your insurance company. Should you be proactive? Should you wait until you get the cancellation notice? Do you know whether insurance companies are impressed if you go to them and say, look, we've had the fire department come and do an inspection of our property and they said we've done all the right things? Any experience in dealing with insurance companies to try and avoid the problem?
So we'll introduce Kendall, Kendall from Morton, correct? And he can answer all of these questions. I'll let him introduce himself because I'm going to mess it up. But go ahead.
So the magic answer to your question is don't wait. I think that was the theme of the presentation here is if you can do something to make your area safer, don't wait for insurance. Some of the notes that I took just in case someone was going to ask a similar question, I thought I'd put this down. So insurance companies use satellite data to determine fire risk. And then they have an algorithm that they put homes into one of three categories. One is no concerns, two is high risk, and three is extreme risk. So if you're in the number three, the extreme risk, there's not a whole lot you can do. There are some carriers like Allstate and State Farm, they're going to cancel you. All right, and that has to do with the changing of the map. As they redraw, the federal government redraws the wildfire maps and where the risk is, and they do the same thing with earthquakes and with flood zones. So now they're doing with wildfires. So if you're in the third one, extreme risk, there's not a whole lot you can do there. I used to work with, AARP and the Hartford, and they have a model there. If you go through AARP, they can't cancel for any reason, but they sure can jack up your insurance premium. So maybe there's a hope there through AARP, but a lot of your other insurance companies can cancel. But if you're in the high risk, in the middle category, yes. This is where you mitigate. This is where you do what you can. They talked about having, that zone of space between you and your house, and you take pictures of it. So when they reassess, you're up for renewal, you can go to your agent and you can say, yes, I've done the following. I've taken pictures. And because we advise our own corporate clients and public entities that we work with, cities, counties, universities, et cetera, we ask them to be proactive in the areas of concern so that when the insurance company comes around, we can show their underwriters that they've taken all the steps that they could. And sometimes that's the difference of cancellation or non-cancellation, or sometimes you'll keep their coverage, but you would have received a much higher rate, but since you showed that you've made effort, they only increased it, half as much. So the answer is, do what you can now that you can afford. A lot of your clearing and stuff sometimes only costs like $2,500. There's a lot you can do with a little bit of money in your area to make it safer.
No, I don't have to be convinced that I'm going to go out and do more that I'm already doing. I was just thinking in terms of the timing. I'm sort of hearing from what you're saying is that if we've done all this stuff in advance, if we get the cancellation notice, at that point, we can say, wait a minute, no need to cancel. We've done A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's no risk here.
If they consider you in that middle category, yes, you have a chance. And there's always other insurance companies that you can try also. Sometimes you can use a third party. It doesn't have to be us,
how
a
do you
broker.
find out what zone you're in?
Well, and I was looking for a map myself if it showed a declaration. Right now it's showing just concerned areas. I haven't seen it, declare, Park City extreme risk, or, I've been looking for that. But we don't know the future. We don't know how the map is going to change or be redrawn. So all we can do right now is plan and do what we can and face the results of, however they redraw the map.
Thanks.
All right.
So would at the beginning of time work, you have fireline certification, which I know that there's like that's a plus. And we have a great fire. You can keep that as a mic next time. Excuse me, I live in Old Town area, and I've got a Airbnb next door to me, nightly rental. And they tried to put a fire pit on their deck outside of this Airbnb this summer. And I was very concerned, given the dry conditions we had, that they'd have nightly rentals coming in and using that fire pit for things that weren't up to code. I dealt with the building department on it, and we were able to successfully get them to remove that plan. But I don't think that there is a code in place that prohibits nightly rentals in fire-prone areas like Old Town to build fire pits. These people that come, and it's been my experience, that nightly rentals do not have the knowledge
of the danger of outside fires that the homeowners do. Are there any plans to restrict fire pits in Park City limits? Especially, I mean, and not restrict fire pits, restrict fire pits for nightly rentals.
Sure, I appreciate the question. Currently, there's nothing that we're discussing to eliminate them from nightly rentals specifically, but we are requiring, I mean, every nightly rental does go through a safety inspection in order to get their license. And so we're continuing those, and we'll point out and advise safety elements similar to a fire pit that may not be located in an approved location. And then outside of that, the best thing I could say is that it is a case-by-case enforcement basis that we will do that. They can be removed and replaced depending upon the inspections that we're doing. We're trying to ensure we're proactive on that. We do rely on good neighbors like you that would help us.
My experience has been that these people who do come in and do the nightly rentals will oftentimes burn wood in the gas fireplaces in the house, which leads me to believe they would do the same thing outdoors. Because I've found burnt logs in my yard that they've thrown out when they've started these fires. So I think it's a real danger.
And I think it's definitely worth more discussion internally with the city too. So I'll make sure we're having that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for putting this on. This is very helpful. I have a question. I'm having kind of the opposite problem, and that is, having done a significant renovation, there is apparently an ordinance that requires that any tree being removed must be replaced by equivalent trunk diameter on the property, but I'm built out to the setback line, which is 10 feet. So how do we square this?
That's the problem that I mentioned, that our land management code and our wildland urban interface code don't necessarily see eye to eye and might even be combating each other a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's chat here after this meeting. I'll get your address and I'll take a closer look into the approvals and talk with our planning department and see what we can come up with to help you through that process.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm also in Old Town, and the houses are very close together, but a lot of them are second homeowners. So you can do a lot to your yard, but can the city help us out with maybe not allowing trees between properties that are only 8 foot between properties?
Yeah, and that's, as we talked, we'll be looking at what are, for new construction, I guess the answer would be yes, we'll be looking at that. And the Wildland Urban Interface Code does apply there. So we'll be enforcing that regulation throughout the plan review and construction process, even up into the final inspection. For properties that are already constructed or existing, that's when we'll be asking for future input as we enhance and move forward with more regulations within that Wildland Urban Interface Code.
If we get an assessment of our property and you can see the neighboring properties with maybe some concerns, can we get a letter to give to our neighbors to recommend something?
We'd be happy to reach out to them. Yeah, I mean, formally, because it's not an adopted code, it would just be a recommendation, but we'd be happy to have that discussion. And a lot of folks, once they understand, some of the concerns or dangers that are associated with that, are more than happy to work with us and get to compliance.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Got time for maybe one or two more questions if anybody has any. And we have no questions online. So if nobody else has any questions, we just want to again thank the panel and thank everyone for taking the time today.